Hello. I wasn't sure if I was going to make this video, but here I am. I would love to see combat slash Carnage become basically more viable, so here I am making this video. These are just my thoughts, my opinions. Feel free to leave yours in the comment section. I'm more than happy to read what other people think about the spec or what could potentially help it. I've played Marauders since 2.0, or I guess the beginning of 2.0. It's near the end of 1.0 that I started branching out. Um, really have enjoyed Carnage throughout the entire game. It's been my favorite spec up until maybe a little bit into 6.0, where Forced Clarity and Fierce Power started causing way too many GCD issues and got a lot of ghost GCDs and other issues that ruined not only my uptime but my ability to do damage, because when I would hit something, the ability wouldn't go off, or I would hit Fierce Power and I would get locked into a GCD because I hit Fierce Power. Like, all that stuff just negatively impacted that class, and it made it no longer fun for me to really enjoy playing the class. So that's probably about the downfall, and now that the new expansion's out, we don't have to use Fierce Power anymore. These problems have almost nearly all gone away. There's still some situations where I hit an ability on somebody and it just won't go off. It's usually only specific players. I assume that's probably something to do with lag, because it's always just certain players and it's always just for certain windows of time. So that could be FPS drops, it could be ping, all kinds of different stuff. But anyway, getting into this video, I'm going to talk about multiple things in the skill tree, and forgive me for the background. We're just going to be looking at the skill tree, nothing too special. The first thing that I really want to cover is that Puncture is a cone, and because it's a cone, it doesn't hit very often, if at all. I've gotten a few times where this has actually hit more than one target, believe it or not, and the range for this is just not very good. I would love for the range either to be increased and or the radius of the cone to be larger, or maybe even make it a 180 but make the range shorter. Anything but not the way it is right now, because it's really bad. I would love to see that. This is very unique. I would really love to see like an actual AoE spec of Carnage. Obviously, it probably wouldn't do as much single turret burst to somebody because it'd be more focused on AoE, so it'd probably just do less damage in a situation that it has to do single turret damage. I think that's very unique. There are situations where AoE damage is king, and that would be really cool to have a loadout just focused on AoE damage. It'd be totally cool. So having that changed would be awesome, because right now it's kind of just like a dead talent, or a talent you would take because you don't want Zen Lance or you don't want Driving Lance. Going into Zen Lance, I'm not going to cover this too much. I think this is okay, but it could be better if a change to level 43 quickness that I'm going to talk about later. This would be better if that happens. However, we'll just skip over this. And lastly, we'll cover Driving Lance. This gets you stuck a lot, and I don't like that, right? That's an animation issue, probably. I'm not really sure exactly what the issue is. It should just work like a leap, honestly. If they're going to do abilities that move you, they should just make it work just like the leap. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. It gets you stuck, it puts you inside of terrain often. A shovel, I've been trapped in the stairs multiple times using this. So any elevation can get you stuck quite often using this. And also, Driving Lance removes your Sunder. So when you use this ability, you no longer have Sunder on your Lance. The original Lance does have a Sunder that gets applied, and that lowers armor rating of the target. And a person with a lower armor rating, which is only 20% of their current armor rating, when they have a lower armor rating, that means they have less damage reduction, which means that you can hit them harder. Obviously, on classes that have low armor rating, like Inquisitors, this isn't very impactful. But for example, if you're hitting a power attack with power yield up, 20% of their armor is a lot of armor at that point, where it'll actually end up being more than like 3 to 5 to maybe like 6 to 8% of their damage reduction that you're shredding there just by putting a Sunder on them. So that's just a fat L overall, and the 10% increased movement speed is just not worth it. Going into the level 27 options, you don't really have much of a choice here, right? You're pretty much always forced into Transcendence because it's just too good. Quite literally just too good. There's no real situation where you can take Blade Barrage route like having this root is awesome, but not being able to take it because you need transcendence kind of sucks. We could care less about the one focus. This we could care less about this also, mostly because we're just going to take transcendence. Like there's these two. I can't think of a situation where you would ever want to take these two over transcendence, like ever. Like it's just the worst every single time that you would take these. And it's super unfortunate. I know some people probably do like the root, but giving up your predation for it or transcendence is just I can't see a world where you would want that. So unfortunately, I feel like these are uncreative, and I feel like these two could be in a different selection. And transcendence, like I feel like you can't maybe don't make it baseline, but I feel like this is just too good to be in this selection. It's just way too good. And I would hate to lose another ability because they would make a poor selection choice again. So I am very iffy about talking more about this. Going into level 39 options, we're going to talk about defensive flourish first, obviously left to right. Increasing this by 1% would be pretty good, right? But my biggest worry about something like this is that when you have a defensive option right next to two offensive options, kind of feels like if that class is weak defensively, especially in PvP, and we're not really talking about PvE here, don't really like this is not aimed at PvE, but this would help PvE overall. Like some of these changes, having like this option, like it feels bad. So like if you can't survive most of the situations, you have to take all the defensive talents in your tree to be competitive with other classes. That's just an L, I feel, right? Because this class already doesn't do that much damage. Well, excuse me, the class does, but this spec doesn't, right? So having to go and like give up some of your damage options when you already don't do that much damage, it just doesn't feel great, right? So I would love to see defensive options be in a row of only defensive options and not in a row of damage and defensive options. They should really try to unify that for every single class so they're not making those kind of really silly options. There's no other way to really put that. Then we'll get into one that I think could be really cool. Rush down, right? Does additional 10% additional damage. We don't know how much additional is per movement enhancing effect, and we don't know what the limit of movement enhancing effects are because there's quite a few of them. You could probably hit like I think 6 different enhancing effects. So does that mean that just 60% more? Massacre already doesn't really hit that much, so what's 10% additional or 60% additional to what already doesn't hit very hard? It seems like it's not really worth it as it is. But I do have an ideal to make this better, and that would be changing it to Devastating Blast or Clashing Blast as combat. I should really say Clashing Blast first before Devastating, but sorry, this character used to be a Marauder. That would just make this such a better choice, and on top of that, putting a limit to how much additional damage that you can get. So for example, cap it at 20% or 30%. So for example, if you run Swiftness, regardless of what stack of Swiftness you have, make that count as 10, and then make Predation also count as 10%, and then like any other movement speed also count as 10%. So whatever you would get, so like let's say you get Dark Heal movement speed, that's 10%. You get Predation, that's 10%. Swiftness, that's 10%. Bam, you're at 30%. That's the cap, or maybe cap it at 20%. Whatever, doesn't matter. As long as it's a marginal amount of damage that actually increases the damage of Clashing Blast or Devastating Blast, I think that would be really, really good. And it would also make it just a really good selection. And lastly, we have Valor Plate here, which I think is pretty cool. I like this one. The increased critical hit chance, is whatever. It just makes it crit more often, which means more damage, and it's your main filler, so being able to crit it is really good. And the cooldown reduction on Valor's Call is also really cool. This is your main filler, you use this quite a bit, so this would allow your Valor's Call to be up more often, which I guess is cool. I do think it would be really cool to have it on Rebuke. That would just be really interesting. Especially it would make more sense for it to be right next to defensive Flourish too, because then this would technically be a defensive and offensive option at the same time. Obviously, these guys wouldn't be equal in power, but it is just an ideal. That definitely, if I had more time to think about this, or if it actually mattered, with having a lot of players or a lot of people thinking about something or thinking about ideals for something, you can always come up with better solutions. So this is more so like the ideal of getting the ball rolling. Like, hey, you could do this, hey, you could do that. There's all these cool ideals that people probably have, not only just me, to make things better than what they already are. And we'll talk about force clarity. Force clarity causes a lot of issues to the GCD, fierce power. It's the main reason that I didn't really play Warrior that much in 6.0, because it caused a lot of issues just overall. Stability doesn't really add to the class. If anything, it should have been used automatically. But even then, what's the purpose? It just doesn't add anything. It's a bland basic ability that I felt like doesn't need to exist, shouldn't exist, and should just be flat out removed. Moving on to something that's actually cool, right? So swiftness. This is really good. I do think this should be buffed to 5 seconds or 6 seconds, the duration. The only reason because of that is there's just so many disrupts in PvP. So many. Electro binds, bubble stun, random carbonize, just like almost anything that is a form of CC, whether it's a soft CC or a hard CC, it will pretty much render your swiftness stacks, gone. Right? So if it lasted for a little bit longer, you would have potential to maintain your stacks until you get out of that stun unless you get double stunned. I do feel like if you get double stunned, you should probably lose your stacks because that's a lot of commitment that they just put into you versus just a random bubble stun causing you to lose it. To me, that doesn't feel like engaging gameplay. That feels like, this class just feels bad and that class just feels obnoxious, Nobody likes that. Lastly, we'll go to quickness. This is the one that I mentioned the Zen Lance for. So what I think they should do is copy what they did with concentration. So, the auto crit ability that they have with Zen now, that one previously just gave you extra rage for each time you hit something with your abilities. Basically add that on to this. This would be really interesting to take, because you get cooldown reduction on your Devastating Blast, then you would also get rage back for each ability that you use. And during Zen, things cost less, right? And this is called Zen Lance. So not only you're making the cost of Lance cost less, but you're also getting a rage back for using it. So this means that you can actually spam Lance. Like, it would actually work, because if you do it right now, you run out of rage in like 2 GCDs, maybe 3, if that, if you have full rage. It is very terrible, and I wouldn't recommend it as it is right now. But if the changes to quickness allowed you to do the same thing that concentration currently has, to give you rage per hit, that would be amazing. So that system's already in the game, and they could just copy paste it to this, and I think that would be really good. Obviously, ignore the auto crit. Though the auto crit part would be awesome, but it would make it too strong that there would be no point to take swiftness. So obviously, leave out the auto crit part. Overall, changes to these things would just make it overall better, more build variety. So for example, you could have AoE lance, like a better AoE lance than we currently have. We could have a spammable lance that would actually work with quickness. Driving lance would turn into auto crit version, which would just up its overall sustain and burst damage windows, because its burst damage windows are pretty bad. If you compare this spec's 3 GCD burst window, devastating, clashing blast, lance, and dispatch. Let's say those three abilities. You have all 3 of those abilities ready to go, and you do your burst window. An ABPD, for example, can throw a thermal debt, do the rocket punch, and then energy burst. And those 3 GCDs, they've done, guaranteed, probably 180k or more, while you've probably done maximum up to 150k. That does not feel good, especially when your GCDs are a little bit faster than theirs. And they also have off the global cooldown, because they have it's not technically off the global cooldown, it's a separate global cooldown for Shuriken, and Shuriken hits about 20k. There's nothing to laugh at, so they can also use that at the same time. And then they also have a dot tick from Gut that will probably hit, and Energy Burst also has a dot tick. So sometimes you can get way more number slots on one person all at once as a PPT. Obviously, I know this is probably not a fair example or a comparison, because one class is obviously a lot stronger than the other one, but this is just an extreme case, right? So there's like a severe gap in burst windows, and I don't think like combat should be like drastically buffed to the point that, oh, this burst window is so much better, or it's comparable to AP's burst window. I don't think that at all. I think that it should just automatically crit. I just think that should be a thing, because not critting it means basically no damage in that burst window, and it's just really bad. Covering the last section here, I don't have a really specific combat opinion on any of these, because this is for all of the specs, and all the choices are pretty much the same. I think it'd be really cool to see Pacify come back. Obviously not the Ruthless Aggressor version, but just Pacify baseline come back without Ruthless Aggressor. I think that would be really cool to see. I would also like to see Zilia's Ward potentially becoming baseline, along with Adjudicator, just being flat out, baseline without it being an option anymore. And this is just to me, this was like such a redundant thing to have pruned from class trees to put it into utilities, and then now into talents. It just seems so weird. Why is this here at level 64? So if you did that, so Zealous Ward baseline, this becomes baseline. This is really not that powerful at all, and it's usually not even used in PvP. This is pretty much mandatory for PvP. And Trailblazer is an AoE option. Right? So that would leave potentially options to Trailblazer, and if you thought Pacify alone is just too strong, I think this would give a good option for Pacify to be here. And if Zilia's Ward is seen as too strong, I feel like Zilia's Ward would still be a good option here. So you would have Pacify, Trailblazer, and Zilia's Ward. I think that would be really good. It's just overall, you got two dead talents here, and I feel like you'll just never take this one, and you rarely take this one in PvE. You'll definitely take this one a lot more, and maybe sometimes this one, but overall, Zilia's Ward, for at least for PvP players, it's always taken. So it kind of just instantly makes these dead, much like how Predation makes these dead, which really sucks. And there's are situations where I like these, for example, Mad Dash, or sometimes in Rex that you want to take Mad Dash because it's got some use, right? And then you got Choke. Sometimes you want this in 10 kill games because having CC means better windows to basically control and kill somebody. And then you got Undying also, which is just a great defensive. I think this is a great selection where all three of them can be equally used in their respective situations. And lastly, we have this selection right here. I don't feel like these are good selections. I feel like Stoics should be baseline, honestly. I don't see a reason for this. I think this should just be gone, honestly. I think it should just go. Like, I don't see a reason for this to be in the game anymore. If we want to prune things, we should prune things that are just unnecessary. Obviously slows are cool, but I feel like this one is just totally unnecessary. And I also do think for a lot of other classes, don't get me wrong here, I don't think that we should just nerf this class. I think a lot of other classes that have things like this is just unnecessary that should probably be pruned. And that's how they should prune it. And here I get logged out, so just hold on. That, if anything, actually no, I've been talking for so long. So as I was saying, is like things that are like this, like they're not necessarily needed, and they can be pruned. Because most people probably don't take this, and on top of that, some people do. I do see use for this, by the way. So I'm not saying that it's useless. I just feel like a slow should be a slow, not an ability that does damage should become a slow. I don't feel like that should be a thing. I think a slow should be a slow. I think a root should be a root. I think it should just be that simple rather than actually just making abilities that do multiple different things at the same time. The whole idea of pruning, I feel like, is getting rid of these things that do way too many different things all at the same time. I think that's where everything just gets too complicated and every class can just do everything. I feel like we should steer away from that and bring back like things like Deadly Throw, which is a root and trauma that had a cooldown, and it was an essential ability for combat and Carnage back in 2.0. And then this one, I like this one. I don't feel like it belongs in the 7-3 selection, but I do like it, like overall. So I had no problems with this one. So basically, in summary or in all, if we have autocrit lance, we gain the ability to actually just have our burst windows be better, like overall, or severely, like if you compare us to almost any other spec that does burst windows, probably near the lower end. I'm sure we probably burst a little bit better than some specs currently. Quickness being reworked would allow the spec to flow better and make it easier to play for newer players, while also opening the option of Zen Lats to basically be functional, which would be good for dealing with sorcerers and some other classes, and potentially worth dropping the auto crit lance for, which would be cool. The cone being a 180 would be good overall. Well, I don't think it'd be very competitive. It'd just be fun and more functional overall, as it currently is. You do have to remember that this is a white damage ability, and accuracy still plays a massive role in whether it'll land or not. And with the abundant amount of accuracy buffs and defense chances buffs still in game, it's kind of hard to land this, especially when it's going to be an AoE white damage. You're probably going to miss multiple of them whenever you use this ability. So it probably wouldn't be as powerful as most people would probably scream about. Then lastly, Clashing Blast, getting a damage increase on movement speed would allow for it to actually hit something, as currently it's only hitting 50 to 60k at best. So the slight nudge and the slight change to how you may play to optimize burst windows makes it not only more interesting, but also more viable. Then let's go into deadability. I gotta say it, we all know it. Smash. Smash is useless. Was it Cyclone something? I can't remember. Cyclone Sleep? No. Can't be it. I don't even remember on Sentinel what they call it. I just know that it's like, I mean, it's good on Fury, right? Like, don't get me wrong. I just want to make sure that I am saying this right. So Cyclone Slash is, so it's Force Sweep. Okay, my bad. So you see this damage is terrible, but I don't have any gear on, so that's not accurate. So with full gear, I've tested this. I wish I had the clip still. I've tested this where I've hit a PT with their close and personal thing. So basically, when they have an AoE, they get healed. The smash actually does less damage than the heal most times. If it doesn't crit, it does less damage, and if it does crit, it's about the same. Their HP basically doesn't really go down. And that's even with precision window. So that's really bad. The ability is just really bad. It's your second yellow damage option, and I feel like they should just do something with Smash. Either remove it, like that should be one of the abilities that gets pruned, instead of like the ranged route. So like maybe we should trade Slash, or not Slash, trade Smash for Deadly Throw. I think that would be a fair trade, because Smash sucks. This isn't the only spec that has dead abilities, by the way. And the last thing that I want to cover before this video gets way too long, we're already at 23 minutes, 24 minutes. This is way longer than I wanted it to be. Basically, the first thing I want to say about Tactical is do not bring back Veined God form. Just do not do it. No matter what people say, just don't do it. Adamantly against it, and a lot of people that just want it don't understand why they want it. And if they do understand why they want it, then they realize how much it's actually taking away from the class rather than adding to the class. It's basically fundamentally making the spec just a one-button spam. And honestly, if you want to play a one-button spam, you probably should go play a different game. I'm just going to be real with you. I know this spec is probably one of the more simple ones, but why make it more simple by making it only one ability? It makes no sense. It doesn't add to the class. It just takes away from it. And the change to quickness, however, would also help these players that just want to spam one ability, because it would allow them to spam a lot more and not have to worry about building rage. Then we can talk about one of my favorite tacticals that used to be in last expansion is the Prosecution. Fortunately, it still requires Force Clarity. Force Clarity is pretty much a dead taunt. It's not very good, and even if you tuck it, the uptime for this would be pitiful because you still have to wait quite a bit of time for another Force Clarity stack. And this should get reworked to make it work off of a Zen stack, so when you have Zen up, if you use Devastating Blast, it will basically just do more damage. I think that would be a lot better, and on top of that, the uptime would be a lot better too. It would also give more value to the Valor's cooldown reduction Massacre option or Blade Rush option, because then you can have your Zen up just slightly more. I think this would just be better because Devastating Blast, as I said before, isn't really hitting that hard, and it would give an option to have more burst rather than a defensive option like Defel Splice Shields. Then another tactical that I really enjoyed last expansion was Endedu's Malevolence. Probably not saying that right, but anyway. The dot on Lance makes no sense. This isn't the first time that we've had a dot on Carnage in combat. That didn't make any sense. Before we had Ravage dot. That made no sense. I don't know why it was there, other than like helping us get Relic procs, I guess, or getting us a Devastating Blast proc. Which, by the way, getting a Devastating Blast proc on somebody that has high defense chance is absolute pain. I would really love if we could just automatically get Devastating Blast proc off of leaping to somebody, or battering assaulting somebody, or Cecilia Strike. Like anything to help us get that and not have to roll RNG to get that proc would definitely help this class. That's a complete side note. Sorry about that. But basically talking about the dot, right? That dot on Carnage in combat got moved to Fury, which Fury did not need it, by the way. Fury now has better sustain because of that Ravage dot. Their Ravage is better just because of that dot and also the extra critical chance and whatnot. There's a lot of reasons why Fury is better. We're not going to get into that, right? But the dot just helps them even more. This doesn't need to exist. The old version of this that removed precision and was it ferocity, like altogether, and just gave you 50% armor pen, was just overall better in almost every single way. The reason why is because you didn't have to worry about using your precision, and your burst windows are a lot different. So for example, if you had this, you can go from single target to AoE at any time, and it would be optimal. Like you wouldn't be really losing out on any damage, which made the spec not only feel more fluid, it made it feel just better in almost every single way. I really enjoyed this. Obviously, it lowered your overall burst windows and whatnot, but it upped your potential to just be a more adaptive spec, and I really enjoyed that. And it's definitely really saddening to see that it's no longer a thing. I would love to see it be reverted back to what it used to be. And lastly, Tome of Unyielding Blades. I don't even own this tactical because it's so bad. The range of the Massacre AoE, I can't even remember what it actually is at this point. It's been a while, but I'm pretty sure it's your next Massacre like AoE after Smash or something. It's super bad, like super bad, and the range for it is super bad. It's the light damage that you're making AoE, so it has to accuracy roll on top of that. So it's just overall bad. It feels like they have not played the spec and not realized how bad that actually is. So what I would like for them to do is if that, we could remake this tactical or redo this tactical, right? And making it Clashing Blast AoE with a Zen charge. I think this would be really interesting because then this would allow AoE Lance and AoE Devastating Blast if you have a Zen charge when you're using it. I think that would be really cool because obviously this would be a tactical option for AoE Clashing Blast, and then it would also be a talent selection for AoE, Lance. Obviously, you could still get rushed down with this, so it would still do considerable amount of damage, but it probably wouldn't do that much. You can make it like the AoE TD and make it do less damage. I think this would be a really interesting playstyle. I think it'd be really fun. And I think it would make this tactical actually useful because currently nobody even wants it. We don't know why it wasn't removed like all the other tacticals that got removed. And other than that, I appreciate you guys for hanging out and watching. I know this is kind of long, but I didn't really want to sit here and cut and cut. I just wanted to talk with you guys because typically this video is aiming at getting people to think and try to give feedback to the game. Obviously, there are many issues with Star Wars, and I don't want to get into that. I just want to look at the upsides, and I want to make things better than what they currently are. If I could play this spec and it was actually, not terrible, I've done like 12 to like 13k so far a couple times on this one. I did like 15k with it last expansion or 14k, I can't remember. It was on a commentary video. You could probably find it. Like, the fact that augment's not working makes it really hard to kind of beat like last expansion, but also at the same time, the games have been not great because people are more how do you call it, like avoiding fighting, just like last expansion, but just on a new level. So it's like hard to tell exactly how everything is performing, but I do think this class, or not class, but spec is definitely underperforming, and some of these changes would help it tremendously. But other than that, appreciate you guys for watching. I hope you guys have a good rest of your day.